What is going on, everybody? If you clicked on this video, you're most likely trying to find a video about the top quarterbacks this year. And this is a very important video to watch because I'm going to be giving you guys my top 20 fantasy football quarterbacks for 2023. And this is very important because quarterbacks get you the most points in fantasy football, so you have to make sure you get it right. If you do, as always, get any value from this video, go ahead and drop a like. It would help me out a ton. But with that being said, you guys know I do not like to waste your time. And my favorite quarterback, the QB1 this year for me, is going to be Josh Allen. If we look at his previous years, he's a super consistent, high floor, high ceiling guy. Over the past 3 years, he's finished as a top 3 quarterback every single one of those years. And as long as the Madden curse doesn't get to him, I really like his chances to improve and be the QB1 on the season this year. And I say this because his receiving core has only gotten better. He's got Diggs, he's got Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, and Gabe Davis. Not to mention his rushing ability, which really makes him a very high upside guy every single week. He had over 700 rush yards last year, as well as over 6 rushing touchdowns. And that is all on top of his already cemented passing volume that he has. He's an easy QB1 for me. Now, my quarterback 2 on the year is going to be Jalen Hurts, and the only reason I don't have him at number 1 is because this Philly defense is just too good. Last year, we saw time and time again that the Eagles were just destroying teams, and by the end of the third and fourth quarter, they were just running the clock out because they had no reason to pass anymore. And if you expect the Eagles defense to be anywhere near the same level it was last season, which, spoiler alert, it's going to be, you got to take this factor into account. Jalen Hurts is easily the QB2. I mean, he showed everyone last year why he can be the QB2 or even quarterback 1 in fantasy football. He came out last season with A.J. Brown with his very first season on the Eagles and produced a lot, and they had a connection pretty much instantly. He also had Devontae Smith on his second year. And we usually see some kind of gradual improvement for first-year wide receivers, but no, they instantly clicked. And that confidence is only going to build throughout the years, and especially this year. And they've also got Devontae Smith, who's been getting a whole bunch of hype this year and might even break out himself. It's not hidden that Jalen Hurts has a whole bunch of talent, and he also has the rushing upside we love to see in fantasy football because it really just elevates quarterbacks. I mean, if we even look at his rushing touchdown totals, he's projected 11 rushing touchdowns this season. That is 70 fantasy points alone on top of all of the other rushing yards, passing yards, and everything else. And we can't get any further on a quarterback tier list if we don't have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback number 3. And I know a couple people are saying, well, why isn't he the quarterback 1? Well, he might be the best quarterback in the NFL, but that doesn't always translate to fantasy points. He doesn't have the most electric running ability that all the rest of these other quarterbacks do. And he also doesn't have the best wide receiver core. Actually, probably one of the worst. But it is still Patrick Mahomes, and he obviously has the opportunity to finish as the QB1 like he has before every single year. I mean, the guy averages 24 fantasy points a game. He's got to be up here at least, but imagine if he added some rushing upside on top of that 24 points a game. But anyways, moving down to the quarterback number 4, I do have Lamar Jackson, who might be a bit of a controversial one, but I don't really understand why. He is still the best pure rushing quarterback in the NFL, no matter how good Justin Fields gets, or if you think he's a running back, he's a quarterback, man. His rushing value alone is going to keep him up here, at least in the top 5. I mean, he's projected 60 rushing yards a game. Obviously, that does come with the risk of getting injured if you're running out of the pocket that much to get these extra yards, but that shouldn't steer you away from drafting him this year. Lamar, again, like these other quarterbacks, easily has the chance to finish as a QB1 every single year if he's healthy. But outside of his obvious rushing ability, he is on the best offense of his career and has the best weapons he's ever played with. He has a new coaching staff that switched from a run-heavy to a pass-heavy team. And that is obviously going to be really good for Lamar Jackson because he's still going to get his rushing, but he has Rashad Bateman coming off injury, Mark Andrews coming back from injury. He got Odell Beckham that they just signed, Zay Flowers, a new rookie. I mean, this offense is pretty stacked. This offense is absolutely geared for Lamar Jackson to have a breakout season and pretty much have anything he wants in this offense. I love taking him this year. But the quarterback I'm going to put as the QB5 for fantasy football this year is going to be Justin Fields. And part of the reason I'm so high on him is because he has the easiest schedule for fantasy football quarterbacks out of anybody in the league. This is really going to benefit Justin Fields more than anybody, really. But I bet you thought I was going to say his rushing upside is why I really like him. No, that wasn't the reason, but that is definitely one of them. Let me get into that. Pretty much half of his total fantasy points he scored last season was on the ground. He finished as a QB5 last year as well. But he also averaged 75 rushing yards a game, and that's more than most starting running backs. I mean, that is absolutely insane. But if we factor in the rest of this offense, they just got DJ Moore. They have Chase Claypool, I guess, if you count that as a good thing. And they got Cole Kmet, too. But they are really starting to build around him and going full throttle on his abilities. I mean, every year he's been improving in the pass game, and this is just another year a part of the belt for that. I do think he's going to take a step back in the rushing yards because, let's just be honest, 70 rushing yards a game is crazy. Counting the fact that you added DJ Moore, a really good receiving option, I mean, 70 yards is just insane. This year he's projected around 50 rushing yards a game, which is still pretty high, don't get me wrong, but I think this passing attack is going to make up for the lost rushing yards and probably even more. Again, I really do like drafting him because of this rushing upside. He's definitely the most risky quarterback out of these top guys so far, but let's move on to our quarterback 6, and Joe Burrow. I'm sure some of you guys were waiting for me to say this name. And I have him at this ranking because he's kind of like a Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't rush a lot. He averages around 10 to 13 rushing yards a game, but he averages just under 300 passing yards a game, and that sheer passing volume in this offense is what's keeping him this high. But the reason I have him under these other running backs is because we lose that safety blanket with the rushing yards, because if he were to just have a bad passing game, he wouldn't do that good in the week. Now, obviously, it is Joe Burrow. He finished as the quarterback 4 last season. Who is he to need rushing yards? And when you have this good of a pass attack in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, I mean, you don't need to run the ball. But obviously, if we stop talking about the rushing yards, he's a really safe and good option as well. This is why I have him at my QB6. The next quarterback I do have in this A tier right here is Justin Herbert, who came off a bad season for his standards at least. He was the QB2 in 2021 and went all the way down to the QB11 last year, which I guess is making his value drop for some reason. I mean, I'm getting him consistently in the 5th round right now, way after guys like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, which really seems like he's getting undervalued to me. I mean, he was the QB2 on his fully healthy season. I mean, yeah, he had a down year last year, but if anything, that means he has room to improve now, and we should be drafting him back where he should be. Not to mention his offense has gotten even better and more healthy. Last year, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams together combined for over 11 games missed last season, and if your entire offense of your top 2 wide receivers are missing, you're gonna struggle a bit. He's now coming into his 4th year in the league with a fully healthy offense in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and the addition of Quentin Johnson, who is a great 3rd option and is gonna elevate the floor of this offense by a lot. And all of these good receivers are leaning towards a more pass-heavy offense, especially from last year. They relied a lot on Austin Eckler last year because, I mean, they had no wide receivers. He was pretty much their entire offense running and receiving. So just by association, that's going to give Justin Herbert less fantasy points and opportunity for less fantasy points. So Justin Herbert is one of my favorite guys to draft right now, and I really do think he's undervalued. But the next quarterback on this list, who is another guy that I really like finding myself to draft, is Trevor Lawrence. And this is another guy that is obviously improving every single year. He started as the QB22, and now he's all the way up to the QB8 last year. And if you agree with me on that fact that he's going to improve, should a QB8 finish at least be his floor? Because he's going as the QB8 right now. On top of that, Trevor Lawrence is playing with the best offense of his career with Evan Ingram, a new Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne. I mean, the team's good. And yeah, all of these players are probably going to improve their fantasy points, but them all combined is going to elevate Trevor Lawrence's play. When you have that many options, it's pretty easy to score fantasy points. And he also gives us a tiny bit of rushing upside to add on top of that. He had 5 rushing touchdowns last season and is projected around 17 rushing yards a game this year. Honestly, I like investing in his development as the QB8. But moving down a tier here is going to be Deshaun Watson, who is a bit more of a risky pick. Even if you don't want to hear it, he's gonna improve. I mean, he improved every single game since coming back from his suspension in week 13, and from week 13 on, he improved in fantasy points and just regular pass completion every single game. But now he has a full offseason to work with the team and actually get a scheme tailored to him and not Jacoby Brissett. And again, there's always that rushing upside we love to see with Deshaun Watson. He's projected almost 25 rushing yards a game this season. I'm sure he can surpass that pretty easily. And he also has a new receiver in Elijah Moore to just finish out this wide receiver core of Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper. And I really do find myself banking on this team's improvement. Again, I mean, it's pretty egregious to say that he's going to revert right back to his 2019 numbers and season, but he is still going to improve and probably be a pretty viable fantasy option. But next up on this tier list, I do have Dak Prescott, who has been showing a little bit of regression, and I'm not talking about the 5 games he missed last season. He led the NFL in interceptions, and his yards per pass attempt and rushing touchdown totals have been decreasing every year since 2017. But I think there is still a chance that he can be a viable fantasy option this year. I assume the offense will at least want to stay a little bit pass heavy now that they lost Zeke and only Tony Pollard is the running back here, but CeeDee Lamb is entering his prime, and he still has a pretty good wide receiver in Brandon Cooks to lean on. Now, he's not my favorite quarterback in fantasy football by any means, and I probably wouldn't reach to get him, but I mean, he has some room to put up points. But Tua is the next quarterback on this list for the tiers of fantasy football quarterbacks, and he has one of the toughest schedules for fantasy football quarterbacks, and that might be a blessing and a curse for him. His passing volume is there to be fantasy relevant, and if he's playing tough teams, he's going to have to pass a lot to be in those games, right? But he still averaged over 270 passing yards on the season last year, and that includes the games that he left early with concussions. The only drawbacks I do have with Tua is that he's going to get 0 rushing yards. I mean, I don't trust him or the coaching staff to want him to run. He's really injury prone. He's going to be at a really high risk for injury for the rest of his career. So if you want to take that risk on him, you can, but just know that he's probably the most risky quarterback on this list surely because of his concussion. But when you have one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL in Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, he's going to be just fine. Next up on this list, I do have Daniel Jones, who I have this high because he's found a scheme and a coaching staff that knows how to use him correctly. Daniel Jones can be drafted as the QB12 on average after finishing as the QB9 last season with a pretty bad wide receiver core. There has to be room to improve, right? Wan'Dale Robinson and Sterling Shepard are coming back from injury. They just added Darren Waller. They just added a pretty good rookie in Jalen Hyatt. So they have a lot of potential in this unproven wide receiver room. But on top of that service level analysis of, oh, he didn't have the best wide receivers and now they're kind of getting put together, so that means more fantasy production. Daniel Jones has one of the lowest touchdown rates in the NFL for his entire career. This might seem like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing. If he can finish as a top 10 quarterback like he did last season with one of the lowest touchdown rates in the NFL, that clearly means more touchdowns is only room to improve. He's at the bottom of this tier. So any more touchdowns that he's going to get is going to improve his projections. Part of the reason that rate is so low isn't because he's a terrible quarterback, but mostly because there has never been a good touchdown and receiving red zone threat on this team ever for Daniel Jones. Every time they find themselves in the red zone, they either run it with Saquon Barkley or himself, but now they have Darren Waller to be a red zone threat, and he is a real one. The only drawbacks for Daniel Jones, and these are real drawbacks, is Darren Waller gets injured. They also have the second hardest schedule for fantasy football quarterbacks, so those are just a couple things to keep in mind. But Kirk Cousins is next on this list, and if you're just looking for a guy to put up fantasy points, no more, no less, this is the guy. But he's been a top 11 fantasy football quarterback for the past 4 years, and now he probably has the best offense that he's been playing with in a long time. He has Justin Jefferson entering his prime, Jordan Addison, a nice young rookie, and TJ Hawkinson. So I don't see any reason they should slow down the pass attack. They also average one of the highest points against. I mean, their defense has allowed over 26 fantasy points a game on average, and if their defense is letting up that many points, they're gonna have to throw a lot to keep in these games. And because of these reasons, Kirk is a pretty good, viable fantasy football quarterback for 2023 if you want a safe option. But next on this list, I have Anthony Richardson, and you know what? I take back anything I said. He's probably gonna be the most risky quarterback on this list, but he has a lot of upside here. I mean, we all know he has an insane amount of rushing upside, which is why he's really this high, but his passing is a little bit of the reason why he's down this low on this list, and he kind of scares me. For the 1 year that he started at the University of Florida, he averaged only a 53% completion rate, and that's against college corners and college defenses. But I think the Colts are probably the best place he could have landed. I mean, they have Shane Steichen as their new head coach, and he helped develop Jalen Hurts. So I'm not saying he's going to turn into Jalen Hurts, but that's a pretty good coach to be coached by. I'm sure his rushing upside purely alone will keep him relevant in fantasy, and any passing that he does regress positively in will just be icing on the cake. It'll probably be hard for him to outperform his ADP, but he is definitely a viable option. And the next quarterback on this list, who I'm not going to lie, I've had my speculations about, and I've been going back and forth on, is Geno Smith. I think it'll be hard for him to outperform his ADP, but he's definitely going to be a viable option. If you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN on your offense, there's no way that you underperform. And it looks like the Seahawks are wanting him to pass more, and that's pretty understandable when you have probably the best trio of wide receivers in the NFL. And he did just get signed to a 3-year, $75 million deal, so I mean, this offense is his. They've given him the keys here to do whatever he wants. But right next to him on this tier ranking, I do have Jared Goff, who just finished as the quarterback 10 last season. And all that happened was his offense improved, and he's going a lot later in these drafts. I mean, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown entering his prime of his NFL career. They just drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, who's a good pass-catching running back, and they got Jameson Williams coming back after his 6-game suspension. The only problem I see here is that Jared Goff does not carry any rushing upside at all, but even without that rushing upside, I think he can still finish as a top 15 quarterback pretty easily. The next quarterback I have on this list is Russell Wilson, who, yes, is a bit more of a gamble, but I find myself kind of liking him this year. It's like a guilty pleasure. I feel like I shouldn't be because everyone says no, but let me tell you why. I find the consensus of pretty much everybody buying in the fact that Deshaun Watson will improve, including myself, and be a top 10 quarterback, but why can't we have this same mindset for Russell Wilson? I mean, he is a quarterback that has played football in the past 2 years. Granted, they might not have been the best 2 years of his career, but he's still viable. Now, this comparison might be a bit of a stretch, but you guys see what I'm getting at here. There is no Nathaniel Hackett in this offense calling the plays anymore, which you could honestly pin a lot of the blame on for how bad their offense was last season. And a lot of people don't want to realize that in the last 2 games without Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays, Russell Wilson averaged over 24 fantasy points a game, which is really good. Now, I know it's a really small sample size to run away with, and Russell Wilson definitely isn't the player he used to be going into his year 34 season, but I like him better than all the other quarterbacks under him in this tier list, and he has a little bit of rushing upside as well. But Russell Wilson finally has, hopefully, a fully healthy offense. I mean, Javonte Williams missed a whole bunch of time. Tim Patrick pretty much missed the entire season. Cortland Sutton missed a lot of time. Jerry Jeudy missed a lot of time. And that is your entire offense. When your entire offense is missing time, you're not going to be good. He has so much room to be good and make an improvement this year. But the question really is, can he actually do it? And does he still have enough in the tank to do that? That is going to conclude this video. And if you've made it this far, I really do appreciate you more than sliced bread itself. So please go down and drop a like on this video if you haven't already. And I will see you guys in the next fantasy football tips video you won't want to miss in the next one.